This is being written on the back of the watch log sheets because I do not want to open a new document on the console, and I am not yet ready to make this an official entry. The time is 14:12 on a Sunday in the second week of October. I am the duty MTIO at the station. That is, Maritime Traffic Information Officer, the title nobody outside the building uses. And I have 8 hours of my shift remaining when I begin writing this, and approximately 40 minutes before my relief is expected to arrive for early handover, which is itself unusual, but not on its own the reason I am writing. I am writing because I want to keep the sequence straight. I am finding, this afternoon, that if I do not write things down as they happen, I lose the order in which they happened, and the order is the only part of this that still belongs to me. Let me start with the room, because the room is the first thing, and because I want anyone reading this, and I do not yet know who that will be, to understand that there is nothing unusual about the room itself. The station sits on a low headland on the western edge of the island, about 400 meters above the slipway, with a single-track road running up to it from the harbor, and nothing behind it but heather and a fence and the sea. It is a one-story concrete building, painted white originally, and now mostly the color of weather. The operations room is on the seaward side. There is one long window that faces the Minch, 2 consoles set perpendicular to it, a kettle, a fridge, a kitchenette area behind a half partition, a corridor to the toilet and the radio plant room, and the front door, which opens onto a small gravel yard. The door has a code lock. The code is changed monthly. The code this month is the date of the harbor master's birthday -7, which is a small joke from a man I have not met, but whose handwriting I see often on the rota. The console I am working at is the eastern of the two. The western console is dark. The western console is dark because we run single-operator daytime watches on Sundays, by long arrangement, and the second officer only comes on for the 4-hour overlap from 14:30 to 18:30. I want to note that I checked the rota for this Sunday 3 separate times before sitting down at 1200 hours, and I confirmed by telephone with my supervisor on Friday afternoon that I would be the only operator until 14:30. The rota is taped to the inside of the kitchenette cupboard. The rota names me from 1200 to 2000, and it names Katrina, who I will refer to as C, from 14:30 to 18:30. The rest of Sunday is unstaffed and routes automatically to a central duty number on the mainland. This is normal. None of what I have just described is abnormal in any way, and I want that on the record before I describe what is, because I do not want anyone reading this to assume I am writing it because of a long shift or because of being alone in a remote station. I have been alone in this station on Sundays roughly 40 times in the last 2 years, and I have written exactly 0 accounts on the back of log sheets in that time. The job, for context. The job on a Sunday in October is mostly waiting. There are 6 scheduled outbound broadcasts on a Sunday daytime watch. The routine maritime safety information broadcast at 12:33, the gale warning and small craft advisory window at 1300, the inshore waters forecast at 1405, the navigational warnings rebroadcast at 1500, the Hebrides regional forecast at 1640, and the evening safety information broadcast at 1933. Each broadcast goes out on VHF channels prescribed for our area on a fixed timetable that has not been varied in 18 years. The broadcasts are scripted from the latest Met Office and Maritime and Coast Guard agency products that drop into the console automatically about 12 minutes before each window. The MTIO reads the script. The MTIO does not, except in defined circumstances, ad lib, The console records the broadcast on 3 independent channels: a primary digital log, a secondary backup log that runs on its own clock, and a magnetic recorder in the plant room that I personally have only had to draw on twice in 2 years. Between the broadcasts, the job is monitoring skippers in our patch, mostly the small commercial boats out of the harbor, a few private craft, the inter-island ferry, occasional sport fishing, are encouraged but not required to check in by radio when leaving harbor and to confirm passage at any of 3 nominated waypoints. They give their call sign, their POB, their intentions, and an estimated time to next waypoint. I log it. If they do not arrive at the next waypoint within a generous window, I call them. If I cannot raise them, there is an escalation tree. The escalation tree is paper as well as digital, and I have it written in my own hand, taped to the inside left-hand panel of the console. I will refer to this fact again later, because the fact that the tree is in my own hand is going to matter. There are some standing procedures I will list briefly, because they are about to be relevant. First, I do not eat in the operations room, by long convention. The kitchenette is for that. Second, every inbound radio call is acknowledged with the station's call sign and the time to the minute, even if it is a routine check-in, because the routine quality of a call is decided in retrospect. Third, the toilet break rule is that I leave the door of the operations room propped open with the wedge, and I do not stay away from the console for longer than 4 minutes. The 4 minutes are measured by my watch, not the console clock, for reasons that were once explained to me, and that I have always assumed had to do with audit trails. Fourth, when I take a scheduled break to eat, the only such break on a Sunday daytime is between 15:40 and 16:10. I do not turn the speaker down. I increase its volume by 1 click so that I can hear it from the kitchenette. Fifth, if I receive a call I cannot place, the standing instruction is to take the call sign, log the time, ask the caller to repeat their last transmission, and only then, after the repeat is logged, to refer to the cross index. I want to write that down again because it has the look of an obvious procedure, but the order matters. Log the time, ask for the repeat, then look it up. The cross index is a physical ring binder on the shelf to my right. I check it perhaps once a month. The supervisor told me in my induction 2.5 years ago that the order, time, repeat, then index, was because the cross index has, in his words, a tendency to be too helpful too quickly, and you want your own ears to have the first word. I remember laughing at that. I have not laughed at it since this morning. The 6th procedure I want to note, because I cannot now find a way to leave it out, is the one about the wall phone. There is a phone in the operations room, mounted on the wall to my left, beside the kettle shelf. It is a hard line, separate from the radio system. It rings perhaps twice a month. It rings when the harbor master needs to speak to the MTIO about something that is not appropriate for VHF, or when central control on the mainland wants a private word. The standing rule is that the wall phone is answered within 3 rings. If the wall phone rings between scheduled broadcasts and you are mid-task, you stop the task. The wall phone has priority over everything except an active distress call. I have been told this in induction, in refresher training, in a memo on the notice board, and in a casual conversation in the kitchenette with the man whose post I took over when he retired. He told me, drinking instant coffee, that the wall phone was the one thing in the building you never let ring out. I asked him why. He said, because then it goes to no one. I want to be clear that I am not at 14:15 on a Sunday in October writing this account because the wall phone has rung. The wall phone has not, as of this minute, rung once today. I am writing this because of the broadcast log. At 12:33, I gave the routine MS I broadcast as scheduled. I read the script as written. I noted the broadcast in the manual log in my own hand. I keep a paper duplicate because I prefer the feel of it. And the digital log on the console populated automatically. I then made tea, returned to the console, and at 1300, I gave the gale warning and small craft advisory. There was no gale and no advisory. It was a fair afternoon with a light westerly and a meter of swell, and the script said as much. I read it. I logged it. At 1307, the Inner Island Ferry's regular skipper, who I will refer to as M, checked in by radio leaving harbor for the southern run. I acknowledged in standard form. Ferry, this station 1307. Good afternoon, M. Copied your intentions. Next waypoint by 1410, station out. I wrote it in the manual log. The digital log echoed it. M is a man I have spoken to perhaps 600 times over 2 years, and the exchange was so routine that I cannot now recall whether he wished me a good Sunday or whether I imagined that he did. The reason I cannot recall is not unusual. The reason I am writing about it is that at 1341, when I was making a second cup of tea in the kitchenette with the speaker turned up 1 click for the toilet visit I had just made, M called in again. He said in his ordinary voice, "Station, this is the ferry. Copied your last. Much obliged for the heads up on the lobster pots off Rubahunish. Will steer wide. Ferry out." I came back into the operations room, and I took the call live, and I said, "Mas ferry station 1341, copied, station out." And then I sat down, and then I read the broadcast log. I had not transmitted anything about lobster pots off Rubahunish. I want to be precise here. There is a navigational warnings rebroadcast scheduled for 1500, and there is, in fact, a navigational warning current in our area today about unmarked lobster pots in the approach to Rubahunish. The harbor master circulated it in Friday's bulletin, and I had it queued for 1500. But at 1341, I had not yet transmitted it. I had not yet opened the script for it. The script for the 1500 broadcast does not become available on the console until 1448. I checked the digital log. The digital log said that I had transmitted the navigational warning in full, or at 1336, on the correct VHF channel, duration 41 seconds. I checked the manual log in my own hand. The manual log had no entry for 1336 because I had not made one. I checked the magnetic recorder, which I do not normally do mid-shift, by walking through to the plant room with the speaker on and reviewing the time-stamped reel. The magnetic recorder had a 41-second segment beginning at 1336 in my own voice, reading the navigational warning as written with the appropriate sign-off. I want to make clear what I did at that point. I did not panic. I returned to the operations room, sat at the console, and acknowledged to myself that the most likely explanation was that I had, in some fugue or distraction, given the broadcast, and that I had simply failed to log it manually because I was on autopilot. I am 34 years old. I sleep well. I do not drink during the week. I had by 1341, 2 cups of tea and half a banana, and my last shift had ended 40 hours earlier. The fugue theory was not credible to me, but it was the theory I held because the alternative was that the digital and magnetic logs, which run on independent clocks and are physically and electronically separated, had agreed with each other and disagreed with me. So I held the fugue theory. I want that on the record. I held it deliberately, the way you hold a coat on against weather. I made a note in the manual log, retrospectively, at 1343, Navwarn Rubahunish. Lobster pots transmitted 1336. Logged late. Query operator attention. I underlined query operator attention because I wanted whoever reviewed the log on Monday to take it seriously. Then I drank tea, and I waited for the next event, which was the inshore waters forecast at 14:05. The inshore waters forecast went as scripted. I noted it manually. I checked the digital log immediately afterward. I want to admit that I checked, and the digital log agreed with me to the second. I drew a small breath. I considered briefly that the fugue theory was holding, that I had had a small lapse, that the lapse was over, that I would mention it to C at handover. I considered also that I should call the harbor master and tell him my morning had been odd, and I did not call him, because the standing instruction about the wall phone is one-directional in my head. The wall phone is a thing that rings, and not a thing I use. And the operations room phone manual says outgoing calls of a non-routine nature go through the supervisor on the mainland, and the supervisor on the mainland on a Sunday is a duty officer I have spoken to perhaps 3 times and do not particularly want to involve. So I drank a second cup of tea, and at 14:12 I began writing this account, because at 14:11 there had been a second event. The second event was this. I have a habit between broadcasts of clearing the console's pending transmissions queue down to 0. This is not a procedure. It is a tidiness preference, and the console reports an empty queue with a small green dot. At 14:11, I cleared the queue, watched it go to green, and looked out the window for perhaps 15 seconds at the Minch. There were 2 small boats off to the south, 1 trawler, and what I think was a private yacht, and looked back. The queue was no longer empty. There was a single pending item. It was scheduled for transmission at 14:18 on the correct channel for our area. The script of it was loaded. I opened the script. The script read, "All vessels in the Minch and Inner Hebridean waters, this is the station. Time check 14:18. Please be advised that at 15:42 this afternoon, the duty operator will require approximately 4 minutes of station inattention to complete her standing kitchenette procedure. Skippers are requested to defer non-urgent traffic to either 15:38 or 15:48 to accommodate this. Station out." It was not a real broadcast template. It was not on the schedule. There is no such thing as an advisory about operator inattention, and the language, "her standing kitchenette procedure," is not anything I would write, and not anything that exists in our message library, which I have audited, because the audit is part of induction, and I am the sort of person who actually does the audits. I sat with that for, I think, about 90 seconds. Then I deleted the pending item from the queue. The queue went to green. I watched it for perhaps 30 seconds. The pending item did not return. I exhaled. And then I picked up the back of a log sheet, which is what I am writing on now, and I began this because the thing I cannot get past is not that the item appeared. The thing I cannot get past is that the time it specified, 14:18, was 6 minutes in the future when I read it. The script of it was a description of a thing scheduled to happen at 15:42. The thing scheduled to happen at 15:42 is my eating break, which on a Sunday begins at 15:40 and ends at 16:10. The 2 minutes between 15:40 and 15:42 are the time it takes me to walk from the console to the kitchenette and put the kettle on. The 4 minutes the script referenced are the 4 minutes from 15:42 to 15:46, during which the kettle boils, I make a sandwich, and I am not in line of sight of the console, although the speaker is, per procedure, turned up 1 click. These 4 minutes are not on the rota. They are not on the schedule. They are a behavior of mine. They are a habit. They are something the console has no way of knowing about, because the console does not see me, and because the kettle is on a different circuit, and because I do not ordinarily broadcast anything about my own habits. I am, as I write this sentence, 18 minutes from the start of those 4 minutes. I want to put down, in order, the things that have happened in the 2 hours since I deleted the pending broadcast, so that I have it straight. At 14:20, 8 minutes after I deleted the pending item, the radio carried a check-in from a call sign I did not immediately recognize. The call sign was Maris 2, which is a private yacht out of the South Harbor, owner P, with whom I have probably exchanged a dozen transmissions over 2 years. P said in his ordinary voice, "Station, this is Maris 2. Just confirming receipt of your operator availability advisory. Will defer to 15:38. All the best to you. Maris 2 out." I picked up the handset. I said, "Maris 2, station 1420, copied, station out." I logged the call in my own hand in the manual log. I did not say anything in response that referred to the advisory, because I did not know what to say. I did not transmit any clarification. I sat at the console with my hand on the handset for a slow count to 30, and then I made a third cup of tea, which I do not normally do, because 3 cups before 3 o'clock is too many, and because the third one tasted of nothing. At 14:30, I checked the rota again in the kitchenette cupboard, in case I had misremembered C's start time. C's start time was, as I had remembered, a 14:30 for early handover. C was not yet in the building. This was not unusual. She lives 20 minutes away by road, and the front gate code lock was last activated, according to the entry log, at 08:56 this morning when I came in, and not since. C would buzz when she arrived. At 14:34, I gave a short courtesy broadcast acknowledging Maris 2's check-in and other recent traffic, omitting any reference to the advisory. The digital log recorded my broadcast at 14:34. Duration 19 seconds. Content matching my script. I want to note that I scrolled back through the digital log for the entire day from 0900 onward, and the only anomaly was still the navigational warning from 1336. The 1418 advisory I had deleted from the queue did not appear in the broadcast log because I had deleted it before transmission. The digital log is, in that respect, consistent. It shows what was transmitted, not what was queued. The magnetic recorder, when I walked through and checked, also showed only the 1336 anomaly and the legitimate broadcasts. I want to put on the record that I considered, at 1435, telephoning the duty officer on the mainland. I want to be honest. I did not, because the version of events I would have had to describe, a phantom queued broadcast about my own kitchenette habits, replied to by a skipper as if it had been transmitted, sounded in the kitchenette like the sort of thing that ends a career, or at least ends the easy version of a career, in which the next 2.5 years are like the last 2.5 years, and you keep your 7-minute commute, and your 1982 house, and your dog. I did not pick up the phone. I want that recorded as a decision, not as an omission. At 1441, C buzzed at the gate. I checked the front camera, which showed C in her green waterproof and her gray hat, holding her thermos, standing in front of the camera in the way she always does, with her face slightly tilted, because she knows the camera's angle. I let her in. She came through the door, said something cheerful about the road, hung her waterproof on the peg, and put her thermos down on the kitchenette counter. She is 48, has been at the station longer than I have, lives alone in a converted manse on the South Road, and is the most procedurally careful person I have ever worked with. I want to make clear that what happened next is the reason I am still writing. C came into the operations room, sat down at the Western console, and powered it up. She did the standard handover checks. She looked at the digital broadcast log. She read down the list of the day's transmissions. She got to the 1336 navigational warning entry. She paused, the way she always does at any small anomaly, and she said, without looking up, "Lobster pots, good. Did you do that one early because of the weather?" I want to record exactly what I said, because the thing I am about to describe begins with my answer. I said, "I did, yes. The script was up early and I had a window." I said that. I said it in a normal tone of voice without thinking about it, and I said it as I've said 100 small lies in 2 years, covering, deferring, smoothing the join between procedure and practice. I said it because saying anything else, at 1443, in a room with C, with whom I have to share a console for 4 hours, would have required me to begin from the back of the log sheets, and I was not ready to begin from the back of the log sheets in front of C. I am not, at 1506, sure I am ready now. C nodded, made a small mark in her own handover notebook, and moved on. She did not look at me. She continued down the log. She got to my 1434 courtesy broadcast, acknowledging the morning's traffic. She paused there too. She said, "You included Maris too in the courtesy. Why?" I said, "P checked in at 1420. C scrolled back. She said, "Longton, there's no check-in from Maris 2 at 1420 in the radio log." I leaned across. I am going to write this very carefully. The digital radio log, which records all inbound transmissions on station frequencies, did not contain a check-in from Maris 2 at 1420. It did not contain any transmission from Maris 2 on any frequency at any point in the day. The manual log, which I keep in my own hand, contained, in my own handwriting, an entry at 1420. Maris 2, P, check-in, confirmed receipt operator availability advisory, defer to 1538, ACK. I had written that. I remembered writing it. I had described it earlier on the back of this log sheet at the top of the 3rd page, and that description matches my memory exactly. C said, "What's the operator availability advisory?" I said, "It's nothing. It was an error. I deleted it from the queue." C said very quietly, in her ordinary voice, "All right?" She did not press. She made another small mark in her handover notebook. She turned back to her console. She did not say anything else about it for approximately 8 minutes, during which she conducted her normal start-of-shift checks, and during which I sat at my console and did the only thing that felt available, which was to behave normally. At 1453, the inshore waters forecast was not due. It had gone at 1405. And the next scheduled broadcast was the 1500 navigational warnings rebroadcast, which would, if the digital log was to be believed, be the second time today I transmitted the lobster pots advisory. I opened the 1500 script. The lobster pots warning was in it, as scheduled, alongside 2 other minor items. I prepared to read it as scripted at 1500. I want to note that I considered briefly omitting the lobster pots line on the basis that it had, apparently, already gone at 1336, and rebroadcasting it would be redundant. I rejected that idea. The standing instruction is that scheduled broadcasts go as scripted. I read the script as written at 1500, and the digital log recorded a second transmission of the lobster pots warning at 1500, duration 38 seconds, in addition to the earlier one at 1336. C, at the Western console, watched me read it. When I had signed off and put the handset down, she said, "2 transmissions of the same nav warn in one watch is a lot." I said, "I'll note it in the watch summary." C said, "Well, I'll co-sign it." I want to record that the small kindness of that. I'll co-sign it, was the first thing in 3 hours that made me feel as though I was not by myself, holding something heavy. I want to be honest that I almost told her, at that moment, about the operator availability advisory, and about the 1411 queue, and about the magnetic recorder in the plant room. I almost did. The reason I did not is, I think, that C had already accepted my fugue theory before I offered it to her, and there is a generosity in being accepted that makes the truth feel ungrateful. I let the moment go. C went and made herself tea. I sat at the console and watched the queue. The queue stayed green. At 1522, the queue went to 1. I opened the pending item. The script read, "All vessels in the Minch and Inner Hebridean waters. This is the station. Time check 1528. Please be advised that at 1542 this afternoon, the duty operator's eating break window will require approximately 4 minutes of console inattention. Skippers are advised that secondary console will not be in line of sight during this window. Skippers requiring contact in this period are advised to defer to 1538 or 1548. Station out." I want to note 3 things about that script. First, the wording was slightly different from the 1418 version. Standing kitchenette procedure had become eating break window. The change made it more bureaucratic, more like our own house style. Second, it had added the line secondary console will not be in line of sight during this window, which referred to C. There was no way for the script to know that C was in the building unless something in the building had counted her in. The gate code log had recorded her entry at 1441. The console did not, in principle, read the gate code log. Third, the script had advanced the transmission time. The 1418 version had been queued at 1411 for transmission 7 minutes ahead. The 1522 version was queued for transmission 6 minutes ahead. The window between queuing and transmission had narrowed by a minute, and I could not say what that meant, except that the system, if I may use that word loosely, was now closer to live. I deleted the pending item from the queue. The queue went green. I did not tell C. This is the part where I have to write down the next thing carefully, because it is the thing that I am, at this moment, 1543, no longer able to fit inside the fugue theory. C, at the western console, with her back half turned to me, said in her ordinary conversational voice, without taking her eyes from her screen, "Don't worry about the kettle. I'll do it. Stay at the desk." I had not said anything about the kettle. I had not stood up. I had not moved my hand toward my mug. The clock read 1539. My eating break was scheduled to begin in 1 minute, and my habit, every Sunday I have ever worked, is to stand up at 1540, walk to the kitchenette, put the kettle on, walk back, and sit at the console until the kettle clicks. C knows this habit because she has watched me do it perhaps 80 times. But she had said, "Don't worry about the kettle," without looking, 10 seconds before I would have stood up. I said, "Thanks." She said, "No problem." She did not stand up either. The kettle, behind the partition in the kitchenette, switched on by itself, with the small 2-tone click I have heard 600 times in 2 years. I want to note that the kettle is the old metal kind with a manual rocker switch, and that no one was in the kitchenette, and that I could see C in my peripheral vision, seated at her console, with her hands on her keyboard, not moving. I did not turn my head. I want to write down that not turning my head was a decision. I want to put that on the record, the way I put on the record earlier that I did not telephone the duty officer. I did not turn my head because the only thing I could imagine seeing, when I turned my head, was either the kettle switched on by itself, which would have required me to do something I was not ready to do, or the kettle switched on by C, who was clearly seated at her console, which would have required me to revise what I meant by clearly seated. The kettle boiled. Approximately 4 minutes later, it clicked off. C, still at her console, said, "I'll let it cool. You get back to the desk after the 1640." Which made no sense as a sentence, because I had not left the desk and I was already at the desk, but which had the cadence of a thing she would say in normal circumstances. I said, "All right." This is approximately when I went into the plant room. I did it under the cover of the routine post-broadcast magnetic recorder check, which is not actually a routine, but which C would not query because she does not closely supervise me. In the plant room, I picked up the wall-mounted handset of the maintenance line, which connects only to the central mainland duty desk and which bypasses the operations console entirely. I dialed. The line was dead. I want to be precise about this. The line was not engaged. The line was not ringing out. The line had no dial tone, no sound at all, only the slight low hiss that an unconnected handset gives. The maintenance line has been functional every time I have tested it in 2.5 years. It was tested at 0900 this morning as part of my opening checks, and it was working then. I replaced the handset. I stood in the plant room for what I estimate was 40 seconds. I came back into the operations room. C was at her console. The kettle, in behind the partition, had been emptied. My mug, with a fresh tea in it, was on the kitchenette counter beside the kettle, which is not where I would normally put it. I did not ask C when she had made the tea. C did not look up. I crossed to my console. The pending transmissions queue was at 1. I opened the pending item. The script read, "All vessels in the Minch and Inner Hebridean waters. This is the station. Time check 16:04. Please be advised that the duty operator has now noted that the maintenance line is inoperative. Skippers are advised that any concern requiring private channel routing should be raised on VHF in clear. Station out." I deleted it. The queue went green. The clock said 15:58. I want to write here that I considered the wall phone, and the wall phone is the only line in the room that is not routed through the operations console, that does not pass through the console clock, and that is, by long convention, never let to ring out. I considered picking it up. I considered dialing the harbor master directly. I know his number because his birthday is the gate code -7, and his number is on the notice board. I considered it for, I think, 2 full minutes, during which I sat motionless, and C sat motionless at her console, and did not look at me, although she would ordinarily have looked over at least once in 2 minutes. I did not pick up the wall phone. The reason I did not is that I could not work out at 15:59 whether picking up the wall phone was an action I was choosing or an action the queue was about to inform the channel I was choosing. When at 16:02 I want to record, the wall phone began to ring. It rang 3 times. C, at her console, did not move. I picked it up on the 3rd ring, because of the standing rule, and because of the man whose post I had taken over, and because of the kitchenette conversation, 2.5 years ago. About then, it goes to no one. The line, when I lifted the handset, was alive in a way that the maintenance line had not been. There was room tone. I heard faintly the small mechanical sound of a kettle clicking off. I heard very faintly a chair shifting on a concrete floor. I heard then a voice I want to describe carefully. The voice was my own voice. It was reading from a script. It was reading, "All vessels in the Minch and Inner Hebridean waters, this is the station. Time check 16:02. Please be advised that the duty operator has now answered the wall phone. Skippers are advised that the duty operator's voice will be temporarily unavailable on VHF until the wall phone is replaced in its cradle. Station out." The voice was calm. It had the cadence I use for broadcasts. It signed off. After it signed off, there was a pause of perhaps 2 seconds, and then the same voice, my voice, said in a different register, in the tone I use to speak to people I know well, "Don't turn around. Just put the handset back and go to the desk and write down what you saw, and don't write down what I just said." I put the handset back in the cradle. I want to note that I put it back gently because I did not want C to look up. C did not look up. I went to the desk. I picked up the back of this log sheet, which I had set aside for the last 20 minutes, and I have written, since 1603, everything from the paragraph beginning. This is the part where I have to write down the next thing carefully, up to the sentence before this one. I have not written down what the voice said after the sign-off, because I was asked, by a voice I have no reason to disobey, and every reason to be afraid of, not to. I am noting that I was asked, because I want it on the record that I am making a choice. I want the choice to be visible, even if the content of the choice is not. It is now 16:31. The pending transmissions queue has been at green for 29 minutes. The 1640 regional forecast script has just loaded onto my console, on time as expected. I will read it at 1640. C is still at her console. She has, in the last half hour, made one small comment about the wind backing southerly, and another about whether I want a biscuit. And she has, both times, sounded exactly like herself. I have answered her both times in a voice I trust to be my own, although I admit that I am no longer sure how I would test that. I want to write down a thing I have noticed, and then I will stop, because I do not want this account to become a document that I cannot finish. I want it to be finishable. The thing I have noticed is this. The scripts in the queue, when they have arrived, have each been 1 minute closer to live than the last. The 1418 advisory was queued at 1411, 7 minutes ahead. The 1528 advisory was queued at 1522, 6 minutes ahead. The 1604 advisory was queued at 1558, 6 minutes ahead. I will admit that the narrowing has not been perfectly linear, but the trend is real. The phone call at 1602, which carried a script read in my own voice, was queued nowhere. It did not pass through the console. It arrived on a separate line in real time, on the broadcast channel of my own throat. The next item, if I am reading the trend correctly, will not be queued. It will not pass through the console. It will not be deletable. It will arrive in the room itself, in the cadence I use for broadcasts, at a moment chosen so closely to the live edge of my behavior that I will not be able to tell whether I am hearing it before I do the thing it describes, or whether I am doing the thing because I have heard it described. I want to record one more procedural detail before I stop. I have not, in any of this, looked directly at C since she gave me the tea. I have spoken to her in profile. I have answered her in profile. The reason is that I am not yet ready to confirm the question of whether C, at her console, is breathing visibly. I know that this is the kind of sentence that, written down, will make whoever reads this on Monday assume that I have had some sort of episode. I want, for the record, to say that I do not think I have. I think I have noticed something, and I have not turned my head, and the not turning has become the only procedure in this room that has not yet been written into the queue ahead of me. I want to add, and this is the last thing I want to add, because the 1640 forecast is now 7 minutes away, and I need to compose myself for it, that approximately 20 minutes ago, while I was writing the paragraph about the maintenance line, C said, without looking up, "You're nearly at the end of the page, aren't you? You'll want the next one from the drawer on your right." I did not respond. I did not look at the drawer on my right. I am still writing on the same log sheet. I have, by writing in smaller letters and using both margins, fitted everything onto the back of this one sheet. although I am now down to the last 3 centimeters of paper, and I will have to stop soon. I want to note that I have not yet opened the drawer on my right. I do not today intend to. I do not know whether the next log sheet, if I were to open the drawer, would be blank, or whether it would already have writing on it in my own hand, describing the 1640 forecast and the events of the rest of the watch, and the moment, at 2000, when I hand over to the unstaffed evening channel and stand up and put on my coat and code out through the front door, which is a moment I cannot, from where I am sitting at 1633, see how I will reach. The forecast is in 6 minutes. C has just stood up and gone behind the partition to the kitchenette. I can hear her there. She is moving normally. The kettle has not been switched on. I am going to put this sheet, when I finish writing, inside the cross-index ring binder on the shelf to my right, on the page for our station's own call sign, which is the only page in the binder I have never had reason to open, and which, when I checked it during induction 2.5 years ago, was empty. If it is no longer empty when I open it now, I will not write any more. If it is empty, I will place this sheet inside it, and I will close the binder, and I will give the 1640 forecast as scripted, and I will not turn my head, and I will not look at the drawer on my right, and I will see what arrives at 1646, which is approximately 1 minute after the forecast ends, and which is approximately the time the next item, if the trend is held, should reach me directly in the cadence I use for broadcasts, without passing through any system that I am in a position to delete. I am opening the binder now,